Chapter 1. Arrival in the Predator's Den. The crash. Dr. Lena Kate awoke to chaos. The cockpit of her research pod was a mangled mess of shattered screens and blinking emergency lights. Sparks flew from exposed wires, the acrid smell of burnt circuitry stinging her nose. The crash had been violent. Her pod hurtled through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, careening into the dense jungle below. Now, silence pressed against her ears, save for the distant rustle of alien flora. Unfastening her harness, Lena winced as a sharp pain radiated from her ribs. She grabbed her emergency kit and stumbled toward the hatch. With a groan of effort, the hatch creaked open, revealing a twilight world bathed in hues of violet and gold. Towering trees with bioluminescent vines cast eerie patterns across the jungle floor. "Just a routine survey," she muttered, her voice cracking. "Get some soil samples, record the flora and fauna." "Easy," they said. A low growl interrupted her thoughts. The jungle. Lena froze. The sound was guttural, primal, and far too close. Her eyes darted to the tree line, where the dense foliage swayed unnaturally. Her pulse quickened as she instinctively reached for the flare gun in her pack. Something moved, a flash of sleek, crystalline scales reflecting the dim light. It was fast, impossibly silent. She strained her ears, listening for the telltale rustle of movement, but the jungle seemed to conspire with the predator, masking its presence. "All right, Cade," she whispered, her breath shallow. "Don't panic. Stay calm, think." The ground beneath her feet was soft and uneven, littered with spongy moss and sharp crystalline shards. Each step felt like an invitation for disaster. She scanned her surroundings, noting the strangler vines that writhed subtly, as if alive. Then she saw it. A pair of glowing amber eyes emerged from the shadows, locking onto her with unnerving precision. First contact. Lena's breath hitched. The creature was massive, resembling a panther, but with crystalline scales that shimmered like fractured glass. Its elongated limbs moved with predatory grace, and its maw revealed sharp, translucent fangs. She raised the flare gun, hands trembling. "Stay back!" Her voice echoed in the stillness, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it tilted its head, as if studying her. The moment stretched into eternity. Then, without warning, it lunged, not toward her, but past her. A shriek erupted behind Lena, and she spun to see a smaller predator, all teeth and sinew, struggling in the larger creature's grip. The crystalline predator dispatched it with swift precision, its movements both brutal and elegant. Lena staggered backward, the flare gun slipping from her grasp. "What are you?" she whispered. The predator turned to face her again, blood dripping from its maw. But it didn't attack. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, a gesture Lena hesitated to interpret. The den. As night fell, the jungle came alive with alien sounds, high-pitched trills, distant roars, and the hum of unseen insects. Lena found herself following the predator at a cautious distance. It moved with purpose, occasionally glancing back as if ensuring she kept up. "Is this insane?" "Definitely," she muttered. "But staying out here alone? Suicidal." The predator led her to a secluded enclave, a natural shelter formed by massive crystalline structures. The air here was cooler, tinged with a metallic scent. Inside, glowing shards jutted from the ground, casting refracted light across the walls. Lena hesitated at the entrance, her instincts screaming at her to flee. But exhaustion won out. Collapsing against a smooth crystalline slab, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The predator watched her from a distance, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. It made no move to approach, instead curling into a tight coil near the entrance, its body a shimmering barrier against the outside world. A warning? Just as Lena's eyelids began to droop, the predator stirred. It rose with a low growl, its amber eyes fixed on something beyond the enclave. Lena sat upright, heart pounding. What now? The predator let out a series of guttural clicks, a sound that seemed almost deliberate. It pawed at the crystalline shards, knocking them into a pattern on the ground. Lena frowned. Are you trying to tell me something? A distant howl pierced the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footfalls. The predator growled again, its body tensing. Lena grabbed her pack, adrenaline surging. Whatever was out there, it was big and coming closer. Ending hook. The predator turned to her, its growl softening into a sound that almost resembled urgency. For a moment, Lena could swear it was urging her to stay put, to trust it. Before she could decide, the shadows at the edge of the enclave shifted, and a massive silhouette loomed into view. Lena's grip tightened on her flare gun as the predator stepped forward, its crystalline scales catching the light like a living weapon. "Guess we're in this together," she muttered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. The battle for survival had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Tension in the Shadows. Lena crouched behind a crystalline column, her breath shallow. The jungle beyond the enclave was alive with sound. Howls, rustling leaves, and a strange clicking that reverberated through the air. It wasn't just one creature out there. It was many. Kalos, as she'd mentally named the crystalline predator, stood at the entrance of the shelter, its body low and taut. The refracted light from the glowing shards danced across its sleek scales, making it appear more ethereal than animal. It let out a low rumble, a sound that sent vibrations through the ground beneath her. "What are we waiting for?" Lena whispered to herself, clutching her flare gun like a talisman. She peered over the edge of the column, trying to make sense of the shadows shifting outside. A sudden crash snapped her attention forward. A hulking beast, easily twice the size of Kalos, broke through the undergrowth. Its body was covered in thick, matte fur, and its maw dripped with venom that hissed as it struck the crystalline ground. Kalos responded immediately, leaping forward in a blur of motion. The fight for survival. The two predators collided with a force that made Lena flinch. Kalos' claws raked across the beast's hide, sending shards of fur and flesh flying. The larger creature retaliated, snapping its venomous jaws dangerously close to Kalos' throat. Lena's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed planted. She couldn't abandon Kalos, not after everything it had done to keep her alive. Her mind raced as she searched for something, anything, that could help. Her gaze landed on a cluster of crystalline shards near the cave wall. They pulsed faintly, their glow intensifying as vibrations from the fight echoed through the shelter. "Amplification," she muttered, recalling her research. These crystals could conduct energy, redirecting it in powerful bursts. An idea sparked. Trust in the unknown. Lena scrambled toward the crystals, her hands shaking as she aligned them into a makeshift array. The fight behind her was a cacophony of growls and thuds, but she forced herself to focus. "Kalos," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The predator turned its head for a fraction of a second, its amber eyes locking onto her. It seemed to understand her intent, disengaging from the larger beast and leaping toward her. The venomous creature lunged, its jaws snapping shut inches from Kalos' retreating tail. Lena activated the crystal array, slamming her boot onto a sharp shard to complete the circuit. A pulse of energy erupted, blinding and deafening in its intensity. When the light faded, the larger predator was gone, leaving only a scorched mark where it had stood. Kalos approached Lena cautiously, its head tilting as if assessing her handiwork. "Yeah, you're welcome," she muttered, collapsing onto the ground. Building the alliance. The adrenaline faded, leaving Lena acutely aware of her injuries. Her ribs throbbed, her hands were raw from the crystal work, and exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Kalos settled beside her, its form relaxed but alert. For the first time, Lena noticed the fine details of its scales, patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer like living glass. "You're not just a predator, are you?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're something more?" Kalos made a soft clicking sound, almost like a purr, before curling its body into a protective arc around her. Lena allowed herself a brief smile. "I guess this means we're a team now." The unseen complication. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of Kalos growling low in its throat. The jungle outside was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of distant machinery. Lena's heart sank. "Humans," she whispered. Kalo's ears flattened, and it moved toward the entrance of the enclave with deliberate steps. Lena followed, peering through the vines. In the distance, she saw them. Humanoid figures in armored suits carrying advanced weaponry. They weren't explorers. The insignia on their equipment was unmistakable. Malloy Corporation, a resource-harvesting conglomerate infamous for exploiting alien ecosystems. The soldiers were methodical, scanning the jungle with drones and weapons primed. Lena clenched her fists. She'd seen the destruction Malloy's teams left in their wake. Entire biomes reduced to wastelands in pursuit of profit. Kalos growled again, the sound deep and warning. "I know," Lena said, her voice tight. "They're not here for me. They're here for you." Ending hook. As the soldiers moved closer, Lena felt the weight of the moment settle over her. She was no longer a passive observer. If she didn't act, Kalos and its kind would be hunted to extinction. Her mind raced, calculating options. She had Kalos, the jungle, and the crystals, but against an army equipped with cutting-edge technology, it felt like a losing battle. Kalos nudged her hand, its amber eyes unblinking. The message was clear. They would face this together. Lena squared her shoulders. "All right," she whispered. "Let's show them what happens when they underestimate this world." The chapter ends with Lena and Kalos retreating into the jungle, shadows cloaking their forms as the first drones buzz overhead. The hunt had begun. Chapter 3. The ambush approaches. Lena crouched low, her body pressed against a cluster of mossy roots. The jungle had grown oppressively silent, a sure sign that the Malloy Corporation's team was closing in. Even the vibrant bioluminescent vines seemed to dim in anticipation. Beside her, Kalos moved with practiced stealth, its crystalline form blending seamlessly into the kaleidoscope of shadows. Lena's mind raced, replaying the events of the morning. The soldiers' drones had scoured the area with relentless efficiency, forcing her and Kalos deeper into the jungle. Each escape route they took seemed to lead them closer to danger, as though the team anticipated their every move. "This isn't random," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're hurting us." Kalos let out a low, clicking growl, its amber eyes scanning the canopy. The predator's unease mirrored her own. A dangerous revelation. The truth hit her like a blow to the chest. "They're not just after you," she said, glancing at Kalos. "They're tracking me too. My pod, it's emitting a signal, isn't it?" Kalos tilted its head, as if understanding her words, then shifted its attention toward a nearby tree. With a single leap, it scaled the trunk, vanishing into the dense foliage above. Lena frowned, her grip tightening on the makeshift spear she'd fashioned earlier. Seconds later, Kalos returned, holding something small and metallic in its jaws. It dropped the object at Lena's feet, a tracker. The blinking red light confirmed her fears. "Damn it," she muttered, smashing the device under her boot. "So much for staying off their radar." Kalos growled softly, nudging her shoulder. It was a gentle but insistent reminder. Time was running out. Into the maze. As they pressed deeper into the jungle, the terrain grew more treacherous. The ground was a patchwork of jagged crystal outcroppings and deep, muddy sinkholes. Lena's boots slipped with every other step, but Kalos moved effortlessly, its claws finding purchase on even the slickest surfaces. Above them, the jungle canopy grew denser, filtering the sunlight into scattered beams that illuminated the path ahead. The vibrant greens and purples of the alien flora seemed to pulse with life, but Lena couldn't appreciate the beauty. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a prelude to disaster. A sudden crackle of static made her freeze. Voices, human voices, filtered through the jungle. "Sector 7 clear," one voice said, clipped and professional. "Hold position," another replied. "Target is moving northwest. Engage on sight." Lena's heart pounded. She exchanged a glance with Kalos, whose ears flattened against its head. "We're running out of options," she whispered. Kalos crouched low, its tail swishing in deliberate, calculated movements. It was ready to strike, But Lena knew brute force wouldn't be enough against Malloy's advanced weapons. They needed a plan. The Predator's instinct. Kalos nudged her again, this time more forcefully. It gestured with its head toward a cluster of massive crystalline formations in the distance. Lena hesitated, unsure of what it was trying to convey. "You want to go there?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. The Predator growled softly, then took off, its movements a blur of grace and power. Lena had no choice but to follow, her legs burning as she scrambled over uneven terrain. The crystalline formations loomed closer, their jagged edges reflecting the dim light like shards of broken mirrors. As they entered the maze-like structure, Lena noticed something strange. The air here was heavier, charged with an almost electric energy. Kalos stopped abruptly, sniffing the air. Then it let out a series of clicks, each one resonating off the crystal walls. "What are you doing?" Lena asked, her voice tinged with awe. The crystals began to hum, their vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. Realization dawned on her. Kalos was activating them, using the natural resonance of the formations to create a trap. The trap is sprung. The voices of the Malloy team grew louder. Lena could hear the crunch of boots against the jungle floor, the whir of drones hovering just above the treetops. Kalos stepped into the shadows, its form blending seamlessly with the crystalline surroundings. Lena did the same, pressing herself against a jagged outcropping. Moments later, the first soldier entered the formation. His armor gleamed under the refracted light, and his weapon was drawn, scanning the area. "Keep your eyes open," he said, his voice distorted by his helmet's comms. The hum of the crystals reached a fever pitch. Lena held her breath, waiting for Kalos to act. The Predator struck with terrifying speed, leaping from the shadows and slamming into the soldier. His weapon clattered to the ground as Kalos pinned him, its claws slicing through his armor. "Hostile engaged," another soldier shouted, raising his weapon. Before he could fire, Lena acted. She grabbed the discarded weapon and aimed it at the crystalline walls. The resulting blast sent a shockwave through the formation, amplifying the hum into a deafening roar. The crystals exploded in a cascade of shards and light, disorienting the soldiers. Lena shielded her face as the ground beneath them trembled. Kalos took advantage of the chaos, dispatching the remaining soldiers with swift, calculated strikes. #####cliffhanger. When the dust settled, the formation was eerily silent. Lena's ears rang, and her hands trembled as she lowered the weapon. Kalos approached her, its amber eyes gleaming with an unspoken question. "We bought ourselves time," she said, her voice hoarse. "But they'll send reinforcements." Kalos let out a low rumble, its gaze shifting to the horizon. In the distance, a faint glow marked the location of Malloy's main encampment. Lena tightened her grip on the weapon. "If we're going to survive this, we need to take the fight to them." The chapter ends with Lena and Kalos standing side by side, the looming encampment casting an ominous glow over the jungle. The Predator and the human had become something more than allies. They were a team, ready to face the storm together. Chapter 4, The Final Stand. A dangerous gambit. The night fell heavy over the jungle, its usual symphony of chirps and hums replaced by an eerie silence. The faint glow of the Malloy encampment burned against the horizon, a beacon of both danger and opportunity. Lena crouched on a ridge overlooking the sprawling facility, her breath steady but her pulse relentless. Kalos stood beside her, its crystalline form shimmering faintly in the moonlight. It exuded a predatory calm, but its amber eyes flicked toward her, betraying a silent question. "Are you ready for this?" "Not really," Lena admitted, gripping her stolen weapon tightly. She forced a smirk. "But when has that ever stopped me?" Kalos let out a low rumble, its version of a chuckle, then turned its gaze back to the camp. The plan takes shape. The facility was a fortress of steel and light, surrounded by automated turrets and patrolling drones. Dozens of soldiers moved with machine-like precision, their comms crackling orders and updates. At the center of it all was the research lab, Kalo's prison and the source of its torment. That's where they keep the disruptor, Lena said, pointing toward the lab. She'd pieced the details together from fragments of overheard chatter and salvaged data logs. The disruptor wasn't just a weapon, it was a control device designed to subjugate Kalos and others like it. We take it out, and we even the playing field, she continued. But getting close is going to be a nightmare. Kalos clicked softly, its gaze fixed on a nearby power relay. The massive cable snaking from it disappeared into the lab structure. Lena followed its line of sight, a grin spreading across her face. "Cut the power," she said, catching on. "No lights, no turrets, no drones." Kalos chuffed in agreement, its tail swishing with anticipation. The infiltration. They moved under the cover of darkness, their steps perfectly synchronized. Kalos took the lead, its lithe form blending seamlessly into the shadows. Lena followed close behind, her breaths